All right, so as everyone's well aware of at this point, the Kansas City Chiefs fell to the Los Angeles Chargers Friday evening. And of course, credit goes to the Chargers and a lot of things to work on for the Chiefs. But when it comes to one thing that really stood out to me is that there's a growing problem in the National Football League, and that is inconsistency at the highest order with how the game is officiated and called. And there's two levels of inconsistency that really showed itself in what I think was an officiating disaster, a debacle, whatever you want to call it, Friday evening in that Chiefs-Chargers game. And before I get into it, I'm not trying to denigrate the Chargers, and I'm not trying to say the Chiefs should have won. The Chargers outplayed Kansas City. I think we can all agree with that, right? I think Chiefs fans will agree with that. Chargers fans will agree with that. NFL fans will agree with that. And I'm not a Chiefs fan, and I'm not a Chargers fan. But what I've seen and saw over the past really 18 months or so in the National Football League, 24 months, the past two seasons, is a lot of inconsistent problems with NFL officiating. We're going to call it out, right? We're going to spell it out very clearly because I think we got to elevate these concerns. As if we're being honest with ourselves, regardless of where our fandom lies, we need to correct this problem because it's a growing issue in the National Football League. And I think the biggest problem that we're seeing when it comes to NFL officiating over this time frame is inconsistency of the highest order that's unexplainable. So let me explain what I'm talking about here. Let's go into a film clip here early in the game, or at one point in the game, excuse me. So this was when the Chiefs had the football there. You can see a little scramble there from Patrick Mahomes, and a flag goes down there on the right. They call holding on the right tackle, holding on Taylor. Now let's watch Taylor there at the top of your screen. It's going to be on loop. You can see the defense, it's a stunt there from the Los Angeles Chargers, goes inside of him, and maybe he grabs cloth, maybe constricts him a little bit right there when that defensive tackle goes to him and then goes inside him on that stunt. That is a very egregious call, in my opinion, to call that holding. To say that's ticky-tack is obviously, I think, an overstatement, or an understatement, excuse me, but you could make an argument by the technical letter of the law, the way it's called, and you can see on the screen there, we're just going to loop it a bunch of times here, that, yeah, did you impede him by extending your arm and grabbing some cloth? So by a technical definition, maybe. Is it like ticky-tacky to the extreme? Absolutely it is, but it was called, right? You can see the officials there behind the football. You can see the referee there in the white hat. He's actually off screen. He's the guy that's looking at this. He's looking at this the entire way. It's his job to look at this in terms of official alignment, and he throws the flag, right? He's actually off the screen right there. I wish you could see him in the film, but you can't. He's looking right at the right tackle, looking at Taylor right there, and he says, and a little too handsy. I think that's a bad call. I think it's a blown call, but he's right there. Quarterback scramble at the point of attack. Those are going to be called more aggressively, right? This is the moment right there. Could that defensive tackle make the play? Absolutely. The referee rules that Taylor, by extending his arm and allegedly grabbing cloth or impeding, committed holding. Okay, fine. I think that's a bad call. I think it's a poor call, but that's a situation. Quarterback scramble outside the pocket. Defensive lineman, rusher, however you want to quantify him, right there. Officials looking at him say he impeded the progress. Flag. Okay, whatever, bad call. But we're talking about inconsistencies here. Bad calls are going to happen. It's like baseball in a strike zone, right? Sometimes you're going to get outside the strike zone. All hitters want, and all they'll tell you in baseball, is consistency. NFL too. So let's go into when the Chargers had the football here. We're going to get a little bit behind the quarterback here, and we're going to get from the wide copy as well. You can see pass rusher rushes, quarterback scrambles to the right, very similar, throws it downfield for a Chargers touchdown. We're going to get it from the wide copy here. You can see the running back picking off the pass rusher right there. Definitely impedes him. Clearly impedes him. Like, it's not even close, right? It's even more egregious in the previous play. Again, we're going to go just put this on loop so you guys can see this. Grabs him, impedes him as the quarterback rolls to the right. And you can see the referee's looking right at it. I'm going to try and freeze frame it for you guys right here as soon as I can, just to kind of show you how egregious this is. So right here, that's clear impediment right there from that blocker. The whether it's a running back or offensive lineman, doesn't matter. The blocker on the rusher, whether it's a defensive tackle or a corner blitzing the situation, there is extension, there is impeding at the point of attack. This is, to me, is even more egregious than the first one. In fact, I'll go back to the first one real quick to kind of highlight it. Again, they called this on the right tackle. They said this was holding. This was an infraction. That same official, same kind of play. This wasn't two different plays. Very similar kind of play here. And we're going to get it right here once again. Running back picks up the corner, picks up the rusher, impedes his progress clearly. Same kind of call, same kind of structure, no flag. This is the problem, guys. This is what irks me about NFL officiating, and this is what has to be corrected. This is a big game. The Chargers and Chiefs were both playoff teams last year, right? This has playoff implications, AFC West implications. If this holding penalty is called, the Chargers have to settle, most likely, for a field goal here. That's a 4-point swing, completely changes the dynamic of the game and play calling down the stretch. We don't know how the game ends, right? Maybe they even missed the kick, and then things really get crazy. And this is a big situation, right? Quarterback scrambling away from the rusher, needs to throw the football down the field. He has time to throw it because he gets an impediment block from his running back that should have been called holding based on how they called it earlier for sure. Remember, this penalty is much more egregious by the letter of the law in terms of holding than the previous play. But even if they wouldn't have called that first play is holding, I could have said this is a 50-50 no call situation. But because they called it earlier in the game, that first play holding, they have to call this. They have to. It is clear as day. You can see the referees looking at it. He's right there. The two officials have their eyes on it right there, and they don't make the call. I don't understand that, guys. You have got to be consistent. If you're not consistent, people will lose a lot of faith in officiating, and it will get bad fast. We started to see it a lot last season, more and more. We're into the world of sports gambling now. There's a lot more money than there even was before legalized gambling on these kind of games, let alone the player outcomes, player salaries, playoff outcomes, all of that. And I'm not saying the Chargers won the game because of this call, right? The Chargers were better than the Chiefs on Friday night. I think that was clear. I think that was obvious, right? The Chargers had a great game plan. Herbert played a great game. The Chiefs had a few issues. The injury to Worthy certainly didn't help the cause. But the reality is, in close games and big-time matchups and situations like this, you have got to get these calls right, and you've got to be consistent. If you're going to be wrong, that's bad enough. But you've got to be consistently wrong, so that way both sides, both parties involved, both teams understand the rules at the same level and can adjust their strategies and playing style accordingly. Deion Sanders, the great corner, used to always talk to the officials that were officiating him during the games. He would always say, listen, let me know if I'm getting too handsy. Week to week, I have to adjust how I play because some refs like a little handsiness, some don't. So he would adjust his game as long as the refs were consistent, saying some refs let things go, some refs not so much. Here, the refs were horrifically inconsistent on the exact same style of play, and that's the kind of thing that cannot happen in the National Football League. Unfortunately, folks, I wish I could say this was the only play, the only situation where this happened, but it wasn't. We've got one more. But first, let's hear from the sponsor of today's video.
We'd like to give a big thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook for sponsoring today's video. Football season's right around the corner, and if you love the thrill of live betting, DraftKings has got you covered. Bet live on in-progress games right as they happen, and if sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy Sports and have a shot to win cash prizes. And remember, new customers bet $5 to get $300 instantly in bonus bets and $200 off on NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That's right. New customers bet only $5 to get $300 instantly in bonus bets and $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to DraftKings Sportsbook today and sign up using our promo code SMI. Again, head over to DraftKings Sportsbook and sign up today using promo code SMI.
All right, so let's get into another play that really irked me, but got a little bit more attention, and that was an unnecessary roughness personal foul on the Los Angeles Chargers defensive lineman striking Travis Kelce, I believe, on a run play, a third and short kind of situation. And the big question wasn't that the penalty wasn't called, it was that the player wasn't ejected. And I thought that was an interesting dynamic because most people, when they see a punch being thrown after the play, they say definitely an ejection. Sometimes if it's mid-play, sometimes it's in the action of play, they'll let it slide, right? Because it's hard to gauge, flagrant intent. That's the key. So let's go ahead and pull up the play real quick just to refresh everyone's memory. So it's a short yardage situation. Keep your eye on the right side of your screen. Defensive tackle, guy on Creed Humphrey right there. You can see the strike. Boom, right there on Kelce on the right. The play's over, right? And this will just be on loop a few times so we can just watch it a few more times. You can see right there, work up to Kelce, defensive tackle, plays long over, like 3 or 4 seconds over, whistle clearly blown. Right there, strikes in the head. The ref throws the flag. That's good, right? That's the right call, undeniably so. But here's the thing. This is clearly flagrant intent. The play's over, right? The goal here is to cause malice and harm, right? That is the intent. This wasn't anything explicit from Kelce or Humphrey. A little shove right there around Piles. That's going to happen. That happens every single snap. But right here, this defensive lineman, number 90, I believe, for the Los Angeles Chargers, decides to flagrant intent to strike Travis Kelce in the face. Now, he gets penalized. That's fair. That's the right call. But he should have been ejected. And this is where the flagrant intent really comes into play here. Let me pull up the rule book here. So this is from the NFL rule book itself, from the website, talking about striking, kicking, tripping, or kneeing opponents. So all players are prohibited from striking an opponent with his fist, kicking or kneeling an opponent, tripping an opponent, striking, swinging, or clubbing the head, neck, face, or opponent with wrists, arms, elbows, or hands. Contact the head, neck, or face of an opponent with the palm of the hand is permitted. So this is one of those things where it's a weird rule because they say you can contact the head, neck, or face of an opponent with the palm of your hand, right? Which is kind of a weird thing when you talk about, well, isn't there illegal hands to the face? There is. That's a different rule, right? It's just not personal foul. But that clearly was a personal foul, but he struck him with an open hand. So they ruled it unnecessary roughness as if it was a strike with a fist or an elbow, which was the right call. There at the bottom, you can say there, penalty, loss of 15 yards. If any of the fouls is judged by the officials to be flagrant, the offender may be disqualified as long as the entire action is observed by the officials. If the foul is by the defense, it's also an automatic first down. So again, it clearly was flagrant intent, right? And it clearly wasn't a closed fist. So what the officials ruled correctly is that was an unnecessary roughness. It should be a penalty. It had flagrant intent with a strike. It wasn't illegal use of hands to the face, right? It wasn't like they were blocking and he's got his hands up close to the face mask. It was literally flagrant intent after the play, unnecessary roughness. So they made that association correctly. They said, listen, it was an open palm, which is not normally unnecessary roughness, but because it was flagrant intent, it is unnecessary roughness. But also, if you rule that, by definition, it should have been an ejection. And this is the part that's so bonkers because after the game, the officiating crew said, listen, no, it was an open palm, so we're not going to eject him. Right? I'm like, well, that's weird because an open palm, by definition, is also not unnecessary roughness. So you ruled unnecessary roughness, which is the right call because of the flagrant intent. But you also ruled because it was an open palm that he also could not have been ejected. That doesn't work, right? That's hypocritical. Now you could argue, what rule you want to follow, what bylaw, and all that kind of stuff. But this goes back to the problem with officiating, right? They rule on some inconsistent processes and lines and statements and sometimes actions, as we showed earlier in this film, and that is a real problem. That is something that has to be resolved going forward. I'm gonna show this play one last time just so that way we all can get on the same page there. Again, you can see right side of your screen. Watch this. Again, after the play's over, very clearly, open palm right there, right? Again, it wasn't a punch. It wasn't a closed fist. They said that would have warranted an ejection. Tell me, what's the intent here? This is flagrant intent, obviously, and they ruled as such on the field. Flagrant intent, therefore, warrants an ejection. This is one of those weird things where the officials, once again, they have the rule book in front of them. They all know these rules. They decided to follow what they call like the spirit of the rule and the letter of the rule at the same time, which you can't do. You either follow the spirit or the letter. They screwed up once again with that inconsistency. So there's two big flaws here. There's inconsistency with how they officiate the game play to play in terms of how they called holding, and there's officiating in terms of how they manage ejections and personal fouls based on the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And that's a real problem. They have to solve this. It's week one. It's already reared its ugly head. Again, I'm going to come out and say this for like the fifth time. I feel like I'm not saying the Chiefs should have won and that the refs prevented them from winning. I'm not saying the Chargers won because of the refs. The Chargers were better. But the officiating is a real problem that has to get fixed. This was a debacle for week one, and it could have and probably will affect games down the stretch, and it needs to get solved, and it needs to get solved sooner rather than later.